trying to keep the wind off the sound. But wherever I'm standing, what's behind me, almost everyone will recognize. It's one of the great global landmarks, and so it should be. I've been in Australia now for a couple of weeks, just over a couple of weeks. Spoke in Perth, spoke on the other side of Australia in the Gold Coast, both of them fantastic events. I mean, the energy now is unbelievable that's coming from these collective energy fields. We call these speaking events. Actually, they're energetic events. And for the last few days, in a little break before all the talks start again, I've been making my way with some great people south from Alice Springs. Kind of iconic name is Alice Springs in Australia, in the Northern Territories. It's about 5 hours drive from here. And I've been working my way down to this place, known to the Aborigines as Uluru, and given a new name by the colonialists, in many ways better known at this point, Ayers Rock. When I had my experience 21 years ago, when the top of my head blew off and I started seeing the world in a completely different way very quickly, I started to understand that the Earth was like the human body. The human body has meridian lines of energy going through it, carrying information which the body is decoding. And the Earth is the same, because we live in a holographic reality, which is illusory physical. It means that we live within an incredible characteristic of holograms, and that is that every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. So you go to any lower part of the hologram and you find it's a smaller version of the whole hologram. And so all over the world are microcosms of the greater picture, the greater energy field. But some are, shall we say, more powerful than others. Because we live in a holographic reality, which is where we get as above, so below from, what passes for the human body in terms of energy lines and meridian lines of information on the higher level of the hologram, what we call the planet, the Earth, the same applies. And I started to realize when I started to wake up in 1990, 91, that the Earth had particular power points. There's got many, many power points where these energy lines, ley lines, meridian lines cross, but there are particular ones that are absolutely of global importance. And I was looking at them and reading about them, but one stood out all that time ago more than any other, and that was this incredible rock known as Uluru. It's like when you first see it, it's surreal. It's like what it must have been like when someone first saw a giraffe. I can't be seeing it. It can't be real, because around this area, it's low landscape pretty much, and then suddenly, out of this pretty much flat landscape, soars this extraordinary and massive red rock. And you know, you see the classic view of Uluru, and it's kind of like a flat little thing, oblong shaped thing. But when you get close to it and you go around it, it is absolutely extraordinary. Every time you move an angle, every time the light changes, something new appears to you in the rock. And the rock from 1 minute to another can look totally different. And it's incredible when you just sit there and you look at it, and you're seeing images in the stone, and then the light will change, or you'll change your angle, and suddenly you'll see other images. And it's like it's not what Uluru is so much as what the observer makes of it as they use their right side of the brain and their imagination to see what it means to them. It's extraordinary. I remember Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, gave me a gift once, and it was just a piece of wood. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, it's not meant to be anything." He said, "We don't give gifts that look like obviously what they are. We give gifts that say to the receiver, see in it what you choose to see in it. In other words, get the imagination, get that right side of the brain going." And Uluru is just extraordinary when you go around it. It's like a few minutes after you've seen it from one angle, it's like you're looking at a completely different rock, a completely different place. Extraordinary and memorable. And I've wanted to come here for 20 years or so, and sometimes, well, often you do that, and you come to places and you think, well, that wasn't quite what I expected. Well, this was what I expected. But it was more than that. It's not just a rock that gives you incredible inspiration for your imagination. It's also a gigantic energy field. And over that direction is another rock, or a series of rocks, which the colonialists called Olga, the Olga rocks, and the Aborigines call Catachua. And that means many heads. And when you see it from a distance, you can see why they call it many heads. But once again, you've got this flat landscape going out from Uluru and out into the distance to the horizon. And then suddenly there's this other group of rocks that just soar from the earth. It's an extraordinary sight. And you start to understand that actually under the ground, these two rocks, quite a distance apart, but you can see them from one spot. That rock goes under the ground, and the two are actually extensions, like tips of the iceberg, if you like, of the same underground rock formation. And I went to the many heads, the Olgas, the Catachua, yesterday, and I was just as impressed with that as I was with Uluru. So I walked between two of the great mountains, like walls of red rock. And red rock for me has always been the most powerful, in the most powerful places that I visited. When I had my experience in Peru in 1991, I was going around places with red rock and red soil. Arizona has always attracted me in the United States because of the red rock and the red soil. And then you come down to this incredible place, and it's the red rock and the red soil and the red sand. There's something energetically about that, which is phenomenally powerful, I've found anyway, all over the world. So I was walking through many heads, Catachua, these walls of red rock. And as I was walking along, I knew I could see it. There was a seat, because I'm getting on in years, you see. I've got to have a seat. And I can't sit cross-legged on the ground. I haven't sit cross-legged on the ground since the age of about 30 seconds. So I walked through, and there's this seat sitting there, or there so I could sit there. And I'd known it was going to be there. You know, these things happen sometimes. So I sat there, and for about 40 minutes, I had this incredible experience, energetic experience, where it was coming through my feet, and it was coming in the top of my head, and there was an interaction between my energy field and the energy field of the rocks of the place. And this is this misunderstanding that so-called Western culture has for the reality that we're experiencing. We are multi-level beings. This reality is multi-level. The base state of this reality is waveform, vibrational information, waveform information. And this body computer system decodes the waveform information through the five senses into electrical information, same information, different form, which is transmitted to the brain and indeed the whole genetic structure. And we construct this holographic digital reality that we think is the physical world. It's not physical at all. It's just illusory physical. It's what we call holographic. And therefore, when we see Uluru or Katachua, we see a rock with our five senses. We see we might even think it's beautiful. We might think it's impressive and amazing, but we still see a rock, an inanimate object. Inanimate objects have no intelligence. They're just rocks. But when you realize the multi-level nature of reality, then solid as those rocks seem to be, inanimate as they seem to be, they are conscious, because everything is conscious. You know, the experiments that have been done now with water show absolutely conclusively that water has a consciousness. It has a memory. And there's an organization in Germany called the Aerospace Institute in Stuttgart. And they've done a lot of research and perfected a way of photographing information in water droplets. And so what they've done is, one of their experiments, they've got a canister of water and they've put a flower in the water, taken the flower out, taken droplets from that water, that canister of water, and put them in little dishes, and then looked at the information inside them. Every single droplet of water in that big canister with one flower has the flower information in the droplet. And so everything is conscious. The same way that that principle applies to water, so it applies to rocks. Because we see the holographic level of the rock, which is this rock-hard substance. But you go back from the holographic that appears physical, back through the digital to the electrical to the waveform vibrational information construct from which that holographic, apparently physical rock is projected. And you can interact with apparently inanimate objects on that vibrational electrical level. And you can exchange information. And this is one of the big things that was going on. It's still going on, though, of course, not consciously these days, with the great stone circles, where they were using crystalline rocks in the great stones because they were receivers and transmitters of information. And you could go there to the rocks, you still can today, if you know what you're doing, and you can exchange information with those rocks in the stone circles, those great stones in places like Avebury and Stonehenge. And so you can here. And so on one level, you're looking at inanimate rocks. On another level, the real level of prime reality, you're looking at a gigantic electromagnetic field, which in the same way as water retains information. It has a form of consciousness. If it doesn't have a form of consciousness, it can't exist, because everything is consciousness. Different levels of consciousness, different levels of awareness within consciousness, but still they're conscious. So here we have these great, amazing rocks here in Australia. And they've been around, well, goodness knows, millions of years, millions and millions of years. I mean, so bloody long, it doesn't matter. Right back into prehistory. And in the same way that the oceans have been picking up more and more information and retaining it, so the electromagnetic fields of these rocks have been too. This may seem to be just an amazing natural phenomenon of two great rock formations in this wonderful place. But what it is a gigantic electromagnetic library of extraordinary levels of knowledge about what has happened, not just in this area, but what has happened to the world, because this magnetic field we call Uluru and Katachua are interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. So they're feeding off that information and retaining that information as well. So in this place, if you can find the key, is the whole history of this planet from the time that this was formed, it's understanding how reality works. It's understanding what's happening in the world today. It's understanding what's happening in so many levels that we don't see and we don't understand. And it's just sitting there, vibrating to certain frequencies. But there's a fail-safe mechanism, which is preventing people who would abuse that knowledge from accessing it. Because the key to accessing this extraordinary, almost infinite library of information and knowledge and understanding is you and me. We are the key. We are the key to open the lock that releases that knowledge, releases that information. And the key is, are you vibrating in a certain frequency band which will sync you with that information in these electromagnetic fields? If you are, and to do that, you need to come from a place of integrity, where you are going to use that information for the benefit of all. You're not going to abuse it. You don't want it for power over. You want it to empower others as well as yourself. Then you can make that electromagnetic connection. You can put that electromagnetic vibrational key in that door and open it, and it's released to you. And anyone can do it as long as you are in that frequency band. And since I've been here, I've just had some really extraordinary experiences. First of all, at Katachua, I just mentioned, but then earlier today, and since we got here yesterday from a further distance, I've felt the energy field of Uluru. And together they are the most extraordinary, whether you'd call it spiritual, it has connotations. The most extraordinary rock consciousness, I guess, that I have come across. And I'm not going to leave here the same person that arrived. And so many people come here. I mean, the tourist industry is unbelievable. And they pass through, and oh, that's a nice rock, and good luck to them. But they get nothing, because they are not within this vibrational frequency band where they can access the true nature of this place. And this is not just the case with where I am now in Australia. It's the same in all these great, what are called sacred places around the world, where amazing information is sitting there just waiting to be accessed. And when you do, you might not get these great revelations, although you can, but in the days and the weeks, this is my experience anyway, in the days and weeks that follow, somewhere from somewhere come these insights, these sparks of understanding, sparks of intuitive inspiration. Oh my God, yeah, of course, yes. And you often don't relay it back, well, most people wouldn't, to actually being in a place like this, but that's often where this information is picked up. And you know, when you start to see the world like this, and you realize that everything has a consciousness and everything is retaining information, it puts in a totally new light what is happening to the planet's oceans. Of course, we know that most of planet Earth is water, and water is the most extraordinary retainer of information. Therefore, when you look at planet Earth and you look at the scale of the oceans, the depth of the oceans, the volume of water here, you're looking at again, the base information blueprint of the planet. It's like the vastly, the basic information blueprint. And of course, that has a vibrational level, an electrical level, like everything else. But even on the level we're talking about, this vast information blueprint, Now, what happens if you pour, I would say on purpose, from my perspective of what happened, extraordinary amounts of oil into the Gulf of Mexico? What happens when you pour radiation, increasingly, look at Fukushima, into the oceans, and all this other pollution and debris that goes into the oceans, or goes into the rivers? Once again, when we look at the physical, holographic level, it's like horrible pollution. Oh, it's terrible, that oil, and oh, look at what it's doing. But you go back to the base construct of this reality, and you're looking at a massive information distortion, like a computer virus, within the base information construct of the planet. You can rewrite and completely distort the original blueprint for this reality by distorting the oceans alone. And as I've been saying for so long, when you get beyond the prime ministers and beyond the presidents and beyond the heads of the World Bank and all these bloody here today, gone tomorrow gophers, and you get into the deep inner core of this global control system, you're looking at people who absolutely understand, at least intellectually, not spiritually, they find that very difficult, but intellectually, they understand how it all works up to a certain level. They understand that this is a holographic reality. They understand that the holographic reality comes from a waveform information construct, and they are trying to distort that on all levels. Not only in the seas on a global level, distorting the planet's blueprint, but when we eat food additives and all this shite in food and drink, it's distorting the information construct of the human body computer, as I would call it. So they're targeting the original design in every way, shape, or form to distort it, because in a distorted fashion, of course, we don't perceive and understand and see as we would if we were in our prime, pristine state, both collectively, both the planet as well, and also individually. So it's funny, you come to these places and you see these great rock formations that dazzle the eye. But behind that is just this incredible story. It's so deep of both how this reality is constructed and how it is being systematically distorted. But what I can say, just 2.5 weeks or so into this Australian tour, is it's just confirmed what I've been finding all around the world for some time now, and absolutely magnificently in 2011. The world is waking up like never before. You know, I used to go from country to country, and I'd know where I was in a different country because the energy in the theatre, well, I say theatre, it's theatre now, bloody phone box then, was the same as you would expect in that country. You go to Germany, you feel a German energy. You go to France, you feel a French energy. You're in Britain, even parts of Britain, you feel the energy of that part of Britain. What's been happening now is just extraordinary. I spoke in Los Angeles earlier this year, and I guess you'd expect to have that buoyant, kind of open energy in somewhere like Los Angeles and California. It's kind of to be expected in a way. But then I went to, we've got a helicopter going over. Then I went to speak in Bavaria, Germany. Then I went to Rome. Then I went to Sweden. Then I went to Denmark. And now I've come to Australia, Perth in the west, Gold Coast in the east, many more to come before I leave. And the energy is exactly the same. It's the same vibe. It's like not a new tribe, but a new vibe is manifesting within people, and it's the same vibe because they're opening their minds and opening their consciousness to these same levels of awareness. They're starting to generate the same vibration. And you know, what's happening now in the events is that the collective energy field is just absolutely amazing. It was in Perth. It was extraordinary because there was like nearly 2,000 people there in the Gold Coast, generating this vibration of transformation, of knowing, of openness, of thought and perception. And we are definitely in a situation where this new vibration, this what I call truth vibrations, is starting to impact in a much more powerful way than it ever has before. And I've never felt it like this before. And if it's like this now, and my experience is it's exponential, it's getting stronger and stronger all the time, the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years are going to be absolutely amazing as humanity becomes aware of who it really is, instead of living a life of what is based upon what the system and others programmed by the system, parents, people at work, people at school, whatever, tell us we are and tell us about the world. This whole new great vista and panorama of possibility and consciousness and awareness is opening up in so many people, more and more all the time. And it's such a joy to do what I do and see it happening. And I've spent the last few days with some wonderful people who are on the vibe and in the bus and stuff coming down here. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful time. If they were running the world, the people in the audiences in these events in Australia and all those other places I mentioned were running the world, my God, this world will be a very, very different place and a much more pleasant place to be. And that's what's coming. And the control system better get bloody used to it. See you again. See you soon. Have a great week.